The following is a Spirit Street production.
The world of college football is changing so fast, and conference realignment's only part of that. Now we're talking about college teams having 105 football scholarships, which could change the landscape of all the college football. We're going to get into that and much more with one of my pals I've met out in the YouTube creator community, JJ Kitchen. Make sure you're subscribing to his channel, Talking College Football with JJ Kitchen. You're going to see why I like him so much. This is the Big 12 Insider.
Welcome to the Big 12 Insiders, your Big 12 sports show, presented by Synergy Financial Partners. Now let's go to booming North Texas, home of Studio 73. Here's your host, Brien Hanley.
Again, I'm not Brien Hanley. He's still on vacation. He'll be back next week if you love Big B. You got me, and you got my guy, JJ Kitchen. So, JJ, we met on, I think it was a Big 12 Mafia show, wasn't it?
Big 12 Mafia, it was that, or Jason Watkins. It was one of those two. It was one of those.
Watkins.
Yeah.
Folks, there's a whole community of incredible independent creators out there that don't work for 24/7 or ESPN or any of the outlets. Make sure if you are a fan of a school, you surf around and find those. We've got some great podcasts for Kansas State that are just fans doing podcasts, but this guy has a real job like most creators do, and then does this on the side. And JJ, I'm going to start this off with kissing your ass. You're really good at it, brother.
Well, I can tell you this. I really appreciate it. It means a lot coming from someone like you who is just so well respected in this industry. And I can tell you from a guy that's just getting started, you know, I've only been doing this for years. Someone like yourself, it's a true privilege to be on here. And I would tell any other viewer anywhere else, to your viewers, man, you guys get a special treat from Tim. I mean, Tim is one of the best. I don't go on every show because there's a lot of clickbait talk, whatnot. Tim is truly one of the professionals, and I'm truly lucky to be here. And trust me, man, you're a lot higher up on the totem pole than what I am. So you don't appreciate to be here.
I don't need to do clickbait. I just say enough nonsense that it acts like clickbait, but I really mean it. It's not. I'm just trying to get viewers. Let's dive right in because there is this tension growing between the ACC and the Big 12, the members, mostly because guys like me are doing a lot of content about these reports of kind of backroom talks between representatives of the two conferences. Now, you know, they're probably consultants talking on the phone. It's probably not too deep at this point. But let's start here. How big is the tension in the ACC with what Florida State and Clemson are doing?
You know, when you really look at the situation that the ACC's in, I think when you look at Florida State and Clemson, you know, Clemson has kind of got it about it a lot differently than what Florida State has. I think Florida State has been really in the realm of making things a lot harder on themselves, the way they've conducted themselves. You know, it's not the first time they've ever done this. I mean, you date back to whether it's 2016, 2013, 2008. Florida State has a reputation of doing this, and I think over time it has built that. But with the member institutions that are currently there, look, at the end of the day, any type of lawsuit, doesn't matter what it is, certainly hurts the league. You want the league to be complete. You want the league to be in one space, all collectively on the same platform. And look, at right now, you got two members that are really currently upset. You maybe even have a couple more. I think personally, when you look at the ACC from an outset perspective, potentially maybe North Carolina would ever enter that type of phase. But with politics involved, everything else that goes into the economy in terms of North Carolina, Charlotte, Bank of America Stadium, the bigger aspects of, you know, besides college football, I really say you got two people that, you know what, hey, you know, if they think they can go earn money somewhere else, that's great. By all means, take your chances. But I think with just the recent reports that came out and things that we have heard about for a while, you know, the grant of rights is tough, you know, and the contracts are the contracts, and the way it's going about right now, it looks like, you know, it's just going to take a lot more time. Things are moving extremely slow. I think people really underestimated where this was truly going. And I think that with the buyout the way it is, it's going to be truly tough to get out. And I think that the closer we start getting to August and then October, people were going to start to really realize nothing's really going to be moving in terms of, you know, potential teams leaving for at least 2 or 3 years.
Yeah, they're kind of locked in. What, they got an August 15th deadline that nobody thinks they're going to make sure. Hell, they don't even know what the exact number is to get out. You kind of have to let these court cases work through, and they can drag out forever, which I imagine the ACC won't mind.
Yeah.
But look, ACC Media Days, Jim Phillips took the stand, took the podium, and breathed fire. He did. How did you react to the commissioner's comments?
So, I mean, in reality, I think when I look at it, this is probably the second time that I've seen Commissioner Phillips really have that level of confidence that you wanted to see. You had to come out, like you said, with some type of fire. The last time I saw it really was when he pushed back on the college football playoff committee with Florida State not going into the playoff. This one, from people I've talked to, just from watching it, it was a more of a confident individual that says, hey, I've been briefed on this. We go through common comments of different types of litigation that they're currently in. Just you look at the overall situation with the ACC. It's a guy that's pretty confident right now. And I think that the more they dive into it, the more conversations they have. He's starting to get understanding of where we are and where we're going. I think overall, I was actually pleased, and I've been critical of Commissioner Phillips. There was earlier points early on that I wanted to see a little more aggressiveness. We saw this really this past week, but more importantly, the opening statement was a clear indicator that this ain't going to go easy. So great that again, Commissioner Alford from Florida State is doing what he needs to do, but he's Commissioner Phillips is going to do what he needs to do with the ACC. It's very clear he's confident where the position is right now.
It's just a weird position to have your commissioner calling out another member of the conference, but it has been, I don't know if heated is the right word, but it's been an active litigation. They've been leaking stuff to the media, and I bet you it's just hard to hold back those feelings, but it's not great for your conference when you're that torn up over this issue.
Yeah. And I think overall, it's just like you said, we got we really have two teams looking to get out. I think really overall, I think Clemson has done it the right way. It's a lot like anywhere else where you've seen a lot of conference realignment, whether it's USC or UCLA, they were quiet about it. Oklahoma and Texas, they were quiet about it. Clemson was quiet about it. Florida State, and it's just the reason why anybody I talk to, it's kind of disheartening. But more importantly, just on an outsider's perspective, when you look at academia right now, presidents from around different universities, there's not a lot of people really just pushing at the label to try to get Florida State. And you look at these two deals between the two other conferences, I don't think that Florida State really understood what it was getting into. I think Clemson, they still have a great relationship with the ACC overall, but Florida State, man, I don't think they understood that when you look at the two other conferences, you're not going to get a full share wherever you go. Oregon and Washington certainly figure that out, but at the same time, though, they really had no other option. They had to move, so it's just one of those situations where there's a lot of things going on. I've told people now, I was lucky to have David McKenzie on the show, just went into total, just great, phenomenal litigation mode where, just where things are right now and how tough it's going to be to get out and where the numbers are. Just at the end of the day, it's a tough situation for both, for Florida State and Clemson and for the ACC, but overall, dysfunction's never good. It's never good on both ends.
No, it really, Florida State seems like they're throwing a fit, and if they get their way, they're going to walk out the door and go, oh crap, what do we do now? I mean, I think they just expected, hey, we're Florida State. Of course, the Big Ten and SEC are both going to want us and bid over us. And we're hearing that's not necessarily true. And I see, the Big Ten, they probably don't fit the academic profile. And for the SEC, I don't think Florida wants Florida State in that conference at all.
And I agree with you. I think the AAU status is a lot more important than what people think. I think that's something that really gets looked at or overlooked, too much. And then in the SEC, I think really what the SEC does is pretty clear. They want a certain basically demographic of where they are. They don't want to extend too far out. They know who they are. But more importantly, one of the things that was very striking in terms of a comment during SEC media days was the fact that, look, we're not going to cut the pie even more than what we have to. We're in a great position. We got a great number of institutions, but also too, we just added Oklahoma and Texas. We, at the end of the day, we need to get these guys involved first before we do anything else.
Yeah.
So,
speaking of more slices of pie, how did you feel about Cal, Stanford, and SMU? Although SMU is not taking a slice, which is weird.
Yeah. So, I mean, at the end of the day, I think that overall for the ACC, it's a good thing. I think SMU, in terms of what they were able to do, I understand why they're doing it, because even though they're not technically getting a share with the NCAA tournament, overall, the money they're going to get, they're going to still make more money than the AAC. So it makes a lot of sense why they moved. Cal and Stanford, Stanford, obviously, in terms of, Olympic sports, I mean, is through the roof. And obviously, Stanford has a great tradition in football, and the players that have gone through there. David Shaw has done a good job over a numerous period of time. Now you obviously have a new head football coach there currently right now. He's building it a certain way. Cal, obviously, they're going to have a good offense this year. Mike Wilcox, obviously, he continues to build that program. The defense is obviously still going to struggle a little bit. They had a tough time last year in the Pac-12, but overall, I think in an ACC perspective, you were able to put numbers somewhere else. You look at the ACC network. You added 3 more markets in Fort Worth, now in California. Commissioner Phillips talked about how it's going to be now $600 million more infused into the deal. It's a good business move. If they were getting full shares or cutting more into the pie, then you start have to ask that question. Now, does this make a lot of sense because you're starting to lose money? But the fact that they're coming in, SMU really at nothing, then you have Stanford and Cal coming in at 30 cents on the dollar, a lot like what Oregon and Washington did with the Big Ten. I think overall it's a good deal for the ACC, but it's going to be a tough ride, man. SMU's got a lot of money, so they'll be fine. But Cal and Stanford's got a great, a large endowment, so they'll be able to cover things for the next 4 or 5 years. But Cal is going to be in a tough spot for a while. I think they're going to be in a struggle.
Yeah, Cal's already in a tough spot financially. They are deep in the hole, and now their travel costs are about to go through the roof.
Yeah,
these conferences they're absurd. I mean, the amount of travel now, and the fact that the Atlantic Coast Conference has teams on the Pacific Coast just doesn't make any sense. But that's the world in which we live now in college football.
And it truly is a shame. It really is. And when for someone like me and a lot of other people, when you looked at college football, you looked at the purity of it. And when you had the Power Five, I never even wanted the Pac-12 to fall apart because of the tradition that's there. I was beyond happy to see the Big 12 survive years ago when there was much of turmoil. Why? Because there's a lot of history in the Big 12. Same thing with the ACC, the Big 10, and the SEC. The more people you have involved in college football, the overall games, the overall matchups, the pageantry, but more importantly, the rivalries in college football are so important. And I think this new realignment has really pushed away a lot of different rivalries. For Pitt, obviously, it was great to get the backyard brawl back. I mean, that was something that's been out of touch since 2011. The fact that we got that back on board in 2022 was just phenomenal. I mean, it's been an infusion in terms of college sports. I think a lot of people right now just don't realize that the decisions being made right now are consistent to how much money can we make. It's not about the student athletes anymore. It's about what can I get, how can I get it, how fast can I get it, and then who on the way out, who cares who I end up ripping apart, and again, it kills me to see Oregon State and Washington State, 2 proud universities, great fan bases, just overall, especially you just see the pageantry out there, and now they're in the wind. They're in the WCC. Now there's talks about them not being able to go into the Mountain West because the values dropping rapidly. It's just overall, these decisions are hurting the universities, but also too, there's people with jobs as well. So just overall, it's a tough decision and really a tough thing to watch when you're a college football fan. Yeah,
the greed at work here at every level. I mean, you naturally start with athletic departments that are trying to get more and more funding. You're seeing a cash grab by coaches with absurd contracts. Mm-hmm. Now the players in the NIL, now the settlement of the House case. It's a little bit more for everyone except for the fans and the players that have to travel ridiculous amounts to compete. And more so for the Olympic sports. I mean, if you're a tennis player and you're traveling, from Cal to the East Coast every week, yuck. It's awful. It's awful. Well, I want to get into the backyard brawl a little bit. I love that series. I'm glad it's back, man. It's entertaining. You guys really don't like each other.
No, we do not.
We will take our first break and we'll get into that and more with my friend JJ Kitchen.
We'll be right back after these messages from our sponsors.
At Synergy Financial Partners, the mission is to change the way Americans plan for their financial future. Synergy doesn't just offer you a financial plan. At Synergy, the goal is to help you find your best financial future. Learn more at synergyfinancial.com.
Welcome back to the show. Let's return to Studio 73.
Welcome back to the Big 12 Insiders. It's Fitz and JJ Kitchen, who covers Pitt, has a great YouTube channel on his own, Talking College Football with JJ Kitchen. By the way, I love your logo. That isn't your real signature, though, is it?
What's that?
On your logo.
On for Pitt.
Yeah. Well,
Yeah,
whatever the one. Yeah, that's on the logo. Yeah.
Yeah.
That is yours?
Yeah.
Wow. You're fancy. You got a cool signature. I thought it was just a font. How much do West Virginia and Pitt hate each other?
We hate each other a lot. We're not a far distance apart. I can tell you that. And let me tell you something. It's a true privilege to have it back. Look, you'll see a lot of heated stuff online and whatnot, but when you look at the overall pageantry of college football, like I talked about before, rivalries mean a lot. And I think it's important for players to go through rivalries. I think it's important for fans to love rivalries. And look, we certainly don't like each other. Whether it could be badminton, we could be playing each other in, and we still don't want to lose. It's truly a national draw. It truly is an incredible game. And I can tell you this. It's going to be week 3 this year. In 2020, it was 2022 was in week 1. I'm waiting for the day that's no longer in week 1 or week 3, but instead it's over Thanksgiving. That's what I'm waiting to get back. I can tell you this, the game is truly special. And I just think that the major tradition between both universities and both programs and just the storytelling that goes involved with it is truly something. And I can tell you this, the games truly produce certainly one of the best games of the year. And it's great to have it back, with the school so close, but more importantly, from a Pitt's perspective, when we had a conversation about this yesterday, it's great to see a university close to home that actually embraces rivalries, unlike some schools that are out there in Pennsylvania, unfortunately. And it's just good to see West Virginia. But then again, not shocking. It's great to have a great rivalry with a school that really you just collide with on a consistent basis.
I remember the first time I covered an event in Morgantown. Go into Pittsburgh, you get in the car, you drive a little south, you're in West Virginia, and then, we're here. It's like, you're barely in West Virginia, Morgantown.
Yeah.
You guys are crazy close for 2 big universities, but that one and the Holy War between Utah and BYU are my favorites. Oklahoma, Texas is kind of a, I don't know, more pomp and circumstance than actual rivalry. They think they're rivals, but they're not. They are, but they're not hated. They just, Pitt and West Virginia. It's an entertaining as an outsider to watch it go down. But college football and what the TV channels want now, this is a little bit different. The ACC is actually seeing a market bounce with going to the West Coast. That was the old thinking, and it doesn't apply very much anymore, but it does when you go to the San Francisco, the Bay Area market and grab 2 schools.
Yep.
Every cable system is going to have to carry the ACC network. So there is a bounce from that.
Yeah.
But most of it now is about rivalries and good games because the networks know that fans are, if you're flipping around and it's Pitt playing Virginia, okay. If it's Pitt playing West Virginia, it's something, and people will stop on it. It's a good thing, and that's one of the things that I think goes well for Pitt. If everything does kind of come apart at some point, I'll be interested to see how West Virginia fans react. Do they want you in the Big 12 or do they not want you in the Big 12? It gets into those illogical fan arguments that start happening.
Yeah. I can say it's been a good conversation between both, especially too. I bet you it's 50-50. Some of them want them in, some of them don't want it in. And at the end of the day, though, it's always good. The rivalry is always great.
Yep. That's a great game. Look, I've been telling people this for a while that I never felt like, despite the TV ratings, Florida State and Clemson were the most coveted schools from a perspective of the Big Ten and the SEC. The SEC's in trying to collect a footprint. It's all connective. North Carolina and Virginia seem like pretty logical places that they'd want to be. And as we mentioned earlier, the Big Ten also wants to get into some new areas, but only with the AAU schools, that academic country club that seems so important to them. They say it's not mandatory. I mean, they got to say that. Nebraska's not in it anymore.
Yeah.
But that too lends itself to that same area of the country with North Carolina and Virginia. And neither one seems that interested in Florida State and Clemson. And I think at the end of the day, that's what's going to stop this, is they'll eventually realize, well, we're not that wanted. We better figure out how to make this work.
And I think that's what we're starting to really get to at this point. And I think that from people that I've talked to, I think that understanding is starting to occur, because at the end of the day, they're going to have to pay hundreds of millions to get out. And I think that in reality, someone's going to come up to them. I think it's going to be a board of directors meeting and say, look, guys, do we really want to spend hundreds of millions of dollars to go somewhere else when we don't have anywhere else to go? And I thought the Brett McMurphy article was really good in terms of there was 2 school presidents. They're very much involved in these conversations. It said, look, if they're smart, they put all of their energies and their resources into that conference and continue to boost it the way it is. Whether they do that or not, that's still a question mark. But overall, when you look at it, I think from a perspective of the biggest brand, and I had this conversation before, and I'm glad you said it too, it's North Carolina.
Mm-hmm.
North Carolina, when you see that teal, that Tar Heel, you see that blue, you know exactly who that is. You know exactly who's wearing those colors up in Chapel Hill. It doesn't matter where you are. You could be on the East Coast, you could be on the West Coast, you could be out of the country. You could be in Europe, and you'll know exactly who those colors are. I think that that's truly the biggest brand in the ACC. And look, that's no slight to Florida State or Clemson or Miami. Look, there's plenty of great brands in the ACC. It's incredible to go on these road trips and watch the pageantry and watch these schools in different areas. But overall, I think there's an understanding that, the Clemson and Florida State need to figure it out to where, hey, this isn't going to go the way they wanted it to go. They're better off working it the way it is. And if there was ever a chance that if they tried to poach somebody, it would be that North Carolina. And the Virginia stuff, it's a new market. It makes sense in terms of market, but very strange in terms of a team. I understand that obviously they're very good in basketball. The basketball teams in the ACC are very good, but overall, these moves are made for football. So, that kind of one really strikes me a little bit. I don't know if I buy into that from people I've talked to. I think the North Carolina brand is something else. I think it's that good. And it's funny, you said too, and the comment was great. It's truly a country club in that AAU status. Pitt's in that status, which is great. But at the end of the day, it truly is it's pretty much a country club. And there have been conversations to where, when does it stop? But more importantly, does this eventually start coming into the group of, does the Big Ten and the SEC start pushing schools? Because when Nebraska makes a comment, their AD recently came out about 3 months ago talking about, it's our job to solidify ourselves in the Big Ten by getting back to AAU. That's a very enlightening comment to where, eventually when does it stop? And I've asked that question before too, is that, when it comes to one of these super leagues, or is it going to be all 4, or do they branch off? Do they branch off from the NCAA, which I don't think we're going to go to now at this point anymore. But you have to start wondering, and I've told people this before, the ratings and the viewership go up when you have more teams involved. If you have the same teams from each side of the world, to where it's just the same teams every year, viewership goes down. And I think that's why when you look at the 12-team playoff and you have now automatic qualifiers, you're going to have all 4 power conferences now represented in the playoff, along with adding a couple more in there potentially if you can get it in. Obviously, you'll still have the ESPN SEC bias. You'll get some Big Ten bias in there. But at the end of the day, at least every conference is in there, and you have a group of 5 in there. It's almost as if you're grabbing, like, to the point where, the College World Series, you're grabbing schools from the group of 5 level. You're grabbing schools from the Power 5 level. My younger brother played at Coastal Carolina. They won a national title. Coastal Carolina was in the Sun Belt. I mean, when you grab more people, you bring more fans in, and you build the overall viewership by adding more teams in. So I think just overall, when you look at these conferences, I think, like to your point, the minute they stop the actual, the realignment, and you just settle where you're at, I think that the sport is going to continue to grow.
It's crazy to me. I don't know how they think that they can form a super conference of 40, 50 schools and expect all of the fans of programs that were left out of that conference to watch.
I've told it to people before. Tim, me and you are on the same page. Yeah. I've told people, I said, look, at the end of the day, I love covering college football. I love having these conversations, but Pitt's my school. If Pitt's not in it, I got news for you. I'll watch it to cover a little bit of the stuff here and there. But when I talk to Pitt fans, or I talk to NC State fans, or I talk to Rutgers fans, a friend of mine's he's an alumni up at Rutgers, and along with Northwestern, they're like, brother, we're not watching it. we're going to just tune into the NFL. Do you want to lose that viewership and the potential loss of the sport and then not be able to backtrack and grab those other schools again? Or do you really reel in that Power Four and then potentially even the group of five maybe even establishes their own playoff? I mean, they have to be careful. And I keep telling people, you need the viewership of the more people you have involved, the more money you're going to make. But the more you take out, the less you're going to make. It's that simple.
Yep. You got to have skin in the game. Look, if there's no possibility Team A is going to play Ohio State or Michigan in the playoffs because they're excluded from it, I have no interest in that. Yeah. I mean, if I'm Team A, I'm like, okay, have fun. It's almost like if you're a fan of FCS football, you probably spend a lot of your time watching FCS games.
Yeah.
And because that's your neighborhood. That's where you got the skin in the game. So I'll be interested to see if they ever try that. I've never thought that would work. I thought at some point someone's going to say, hey guys, this ain't going to work. This just isn't going to work unless you're going to become semi-pro, which I can't imagine the academic side of the university embracing, basically selling the rights to the school name to operate a football team. We're in a crazy world, brother. Some of this just doesn't make sense.
It doesn't. And I think that these schools, to the point where now they're starting to, we reached that point where, okay, you'll have a collective bargaining agreement coming soon to where that'll really reel things in, you're up to potentially $20 million in revenue sharing, probably about 85% of that revenue sharing, that $20 million will go to football. It makes a lot more sense because obviously it's where the money's at. But overall, I think that these roles are going to start to constrict and come into focus because, like you said, it's just what this sport was intended to be. And again, I played athletics in college. I'd have loved to get a free sandwich here and there, make a couple bucks here and there. But when I go to universities, or I help kids get scholarships, or I go to certain camps and I talk to athletes, I talk to them about one thing: generational wealth. Yeah. NIL is great. You'll get those 10 Tebows out there. They'd have made $1 million. They'd have made plenty of money. Robert Griffin III, you'd have plenty of money. At the end of the day, making a couple $100,000 a year, guess what? It's really not that much. I mean, when we're out here in the real world, it's not. You have to work for the rest of your life. The generational wealth is going to the institution. One, you should pick the school that you want to go to because you're wanted there. You're wanting to go to that school there. You love the coaches there. You certainly have the relationships, the school and the relationships. Relationships still mean a lot. You can make $1 million at a school, but if you hate to go to class every day, you hate to see your coaches every day, you don't love your coaches, you're not going to enjoy yourself. And guess what? Eventually, you will give up that money to go somewhere else. But by that time, it may be too late. The job of a student athlete and their parents at this point is to go to institutions that, one, they love their coaches, they love the relationships they built, they love the institution to where they have great teammates. Okay, and then lastly, when you get on the field and you really earn your stripes, then you make the money. And then when that happens, by that time, you're probably damn near one of the best players on your football team, and you have the potential to go to the National Football League where really life changes. You can buy mom and dad a car. You can buy mom and dad a house. You can build a generational wealth for your future family. The NIL stuff to where it's almost like, they see $100,000. Looking at 18-year-old to 22-year-old kid, it makes sense. $100,000's a lot. But in the grand scheme of things, I think it's our job as leaders to understand, young man, I understand what you're seeing. I understand you're being thrown a lot of things. I understand that. You haven't seen that type of money before. But if you listen and take the process seriously and see where you need to go and realize not everyone's going to go to Alabama. There's tremendous institutions in the ACC, the Big 12. You've got Kansas State out there. You have Pitt out there. You've got Baylor out there. You've got NC State. These places all develop talent. They go to the National Football League. Understand that each institution will treat you differently. Yep. And it's not just a business, it's a family. So it's just a couple of my thoughts.
Beautiful. Beautiful. During this commercial break, I'm going to run through a wall. That was good stuff. We'll be right back on the Big 12 Insiders and wrap it up with JJ Kitchen with some of his final thoughts on the state of the ACC. And I want to know what the future of Pitt football looks like.
We'll be right back after these messages from our sponsors.
At Synergy Financial Partners, the vision is to build the world's largest consumer financial education and empowerment company. Synergy doesn't just offer you a financial plan. At Synergy, the goal is to help you find your best financial future. Learn more at synergyfinancial.com.
Welcome back to the show. Let's return to Studio 73.
Welcome back to the Big 12 Insiders. Fitz and JJ Kitchen talking About the ACC situation, as we wrap this up, I got two questions for you. First of all, what is the future of Pitt football? Is it promising?
I can tell you this. I think after, obviously Pitt had a down year last year, obviously 3-9 after 2 straight years of, ending ranked in the top 25, ranked 13th in 2021, ranked 22nd in 2022. One bad year certainly won't change it. I think Pat Narduzzi did a really good job of understanding, okay, hey, our quarterback play wasn't good.
Yeah.
Our offense wasn't good. And he made a great addition with Cade Bell. Cade Bell comes from Western Carolina, the number 1 passing offense in the FCS, the number 2 overall offense in the FCS, and his creativity, a younger guy, made a couple other changes on staff. I'm excited for it. And I think that when you go into a season like this, you can see a lot of positives when you watch the team practice or you watch the close scrimmages. The one thing that you'll have to see eventually is, though, you find out who this team will be from week 2 to week 12. Week 1, you got Kent State, but week 2, you got Cincinnati. Then week 3, you have the backyard brawl. You'll figure out who your football team is there with the corrections they'll make between week 1 to week 2 to week 3. Overall, I expect their defense to be back to where it was. It's a Pat Narduzzi team, being in the top 10 every year in defense is who they're known for. The questions I have is just, what is the offense going to look like? We've heard a lot of good stuff. I've talked to a number of the players. They're extremely happy. They said, this is college football for us now. We're no longer in a pro style. We're really in a pro spread. It's a lot like a Tennessee where it's up tempo. You're snapping the ball every 12 seconds. It's good to see. Overall, I like the direction of where they're going, but like anything else in the world, you got to go out there and prove it. You got to go out there and prove it and earn your stripes, but more importantly, show that you're back. Show that what you did, 2 years ago, 1 year ago, is not just, a one-off. You did it, you did it 2 years back-to-back in a row, 20 wins in 2 years. Get back on track and prove it, and then we can get back in that conversation.
Okay, final question for you. I believe the ESPN has a look-in 2027 to that TV contract. What will the ACC look like in 27?
So what I really think by 2027, I think, by the time we finish out, it really comes down to the court with these lawsuits. Depending upon how much it takes to get out, if it's still hundreds of millions of dollars, I expect it to really stay the same for the most part, because by 2030, a lot of contracts are up by then. The Big Ten's up by then. The SEC's up by then. The Big 12's up by then. I think overall, when you look at it, I think that, one, the 2027, it'll get extended. Commissioner Phillips was pretty adamant about how it's not going away. His negotiations have been pretty tight. Talking to a couple people within a couple athletic departments in the ACC, talked about the negotiations are really around those third-tier rights, but also, too, potentially getting full shares for people that were potentially added in the future. So I think it's kind of where they are right now. They're playing a game back and forth, and really at this point, ESPN has no really urge to extend this deal till really, I would think, probably till next January when the new year starts, the new fiscal year starts. Makes sense in terms of a business decision to wait that long. Overall, I expect them to extend it. But by then, I think we'll have a decision at that point. If it's a little bit lower, I'd see potentially if things change, maybe Florida State and Clemson are out by then, and you still have the whole league together. If those two schools end up getting out, I would think that, South Florida and Oregon State would be targets to be entered into the ACC, which, USF dropping $400 million into their program. I think they've got a massive alumni base. Anytime they've been successful, heck, they even sold out the Tampa Bay Buccaneers Stadium when I was younger as a kid, going down there to watch those games in the old Big East games. I think overall they'll add a couple teams if those two teams leave, but if not, those teams, Clemson and Florida State stay in the ACC till 2030, and then we figure out what happens then. But overall, I think if just two teams leave, I think the ACC is in a good spot. They'll add a couple more teams, and they'll continue on, and one of the contract negotiations will keep going, but overall, the ACC will stay alive.
There's some similarities here between the Pac-12 and ACC, but what isn't similar is the timetable.
Yeah.
The ACC's got time. They do. The Pac-12 didn't. They were up against the clock and couldn't get it done. And also, once the Pac-12 started to fall apart, and in some ways it was self-inflicted because they were so picky, there just was no substitutes. You couldn't just – they talked about San Diego State, but you can't plug a school in or multiple schools from the West and have it feel like it fits. In the Atlantic Coast area, you do have USF. You have Tulane. You have Oregon State and Washington State sit down. You got UConn up there with their basketball program. So you got some really tangible choices.
Yeah, and I think that really the like you said, the biggest thing is, and because people ask me that all the time, what's really the difference between the ACC and the Pac-12? And I said, really, the major difference that makes it different is the grant of rights. When you look at the Pac-12, like you said, they didn't have a media rights deal, and I think to this day, universities will have a case study on how badly the Pac-12 was managed by George Klinkoff. I think that his lack of leadership certainly showed. There was a deal on the table with ESPN. They didn't accept it. They wanted $55 million a year in distributions. That was never realistic for that conference. Overall, the Pac-12 would be here if there was competent leadership there. And I think that when you looked at those deals, the realization came in quickly. There is no TV rights deal. There's no buyout. Each one of those schools, whether it was going to the Big Ten, the ACC, or the Big 12, clearly, guess what? Had no buyout, nothing. They were able to go as by kingdom come. It was easy to get out of that deal because, one, there was no deal. Overall, again, it's a horrible way that it ended. But then, when you look at it, it truly was self-inflicted. They signed that deal. The Pac-12's still alive today. So at the end of the day, it's bad business decisions by some of these institutions, but also too, there's a lot of degrees in academia, but when it comes to negotiations, I think there's a lot of people who need to learn, especially from case studies, in terms of what this actually truly looks like, understanding values, what each school is worth. I certainly hope people learn from the Pac-12 and just understand where the currently schools are. But I think just the ACC is in a lot different position. When you have a grant of rights till 2036, 12 years down the road, you've got potential additions. The only way that I really see the ACC falling apart is if they lose, Clemson, Florida State, North Carolina State, and then potentially Miami. At that point, then you got to start. Then it's over. I think you lose those 5 or 6 schools, it's over. But I think at the stage of the game, if they're not going to the Power 2, they're not going anywhere. And I just think that right now, the Big 12, the Big 10, and the SEC are just being so selective in where they're looking. I just think in the ACC, when it comes to the Power 2, it's North Carolina for sure, and then potentially Virginia. The rest of them, there's a lot of question marks. And I don't think it works out for any of them.
I agree. He's JJ Kitchen. Now you see why I like him so much. He's his show's great. He does a great job. And that's why I had him on. I wanted the ACC perspective, and I knew the right guy to call upon. Thank you, brother. Thanks for coming on.
Anytime. Thank you so much for having me on. The viewers, man, you guys are lucky to be able to watch Tim, man. Truly one of the best and a professional in this business. So I appreciate it. Anytime you want me on, brother, you let me know. I'll make time.
You bet. I got good news for the viewers. Big B will be back next week, so you don't have to look at me all week. I'll be here with him, but he'll be in charge. That's it for the show. We'll see you next week.
This has been a GoPowercat.com and Spirit Street production. Please support this show by subscribing to this YouTube channel or follow us on your favorite podcast platform.